Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Ask Mike, and gee, where is everybody? I'm like by myself. No Courtney, no Alyssa. This is gonna be weird. Well, they're off at the bowl game. There was no way to do all the graphics and all the stuff that we do on Ask Mike from Memphis, so I'm back here at the studio and we'll do it and we'll try to get through this. If you can put up with me not only answering the question, but asking my own question for me to answer. A little bit weird, but we'll try to get through it. So let's get started. Our first question this week is from Lanny, who wants to know, what is up with Missouri? They looked awful against Wake Forest. Their quarterback, who was running all over the place against us, was a no-show. Not the same team that played us. Is this really all about this rivalry, non-rivalry nonsense? Well, I think there are a lot of people on social media that want you to believe that because Arkansas fans don't view this game as a rivalry and they've somehow assumed the players don't and they don't get up for the game, and therefore Arkansas's 2-7 record against Missouri in the 9 games that have been played since Missouri came into the SEC. That's all Arkansas overlooking Missouri, not giving them respect, coaches not preparing them for the game, blah, 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 blah. I mean, believe me, here's what's going on. You got a lot of people mad about this season, and they're looking for things to blame it on. And the Missouri game is a perfect target because what they're saying is, boy, there was an obvious talent mismatch in that game. There always is. Arkansas is so much better than Missouri. There's no excuse for them ever losing to those guys. Therefore, I was sitting home and watching on television, but I could see on the sidelines that Arkansas's players just weren't into the game. Give me a break. You can't see that. Look, I'll admit Arkansas was flat in that game, and I'll get into why that happened a little bit later, but I want to go back and talk a little bit about the whole history of this series because this is what people are approaching it from. Somehow that 2-7 record over 9 years is a result of Sam Pittman and his staff. So let's go back and let's tackle assumption number 1, that Missouri is always inferior to Arkansas talent-wise. I remember some of those games against Brett Bielema, 2 in particular that I watched. I was there, and I absolutely thought Missouri had the better players and the better team in those 2 games that they won. Now, there are also 2 games that Bielema himself made tactical coaching mistakes that cost Arkansas the game. One of them was in Columbia where Brandon Allen had some sort of an issue here with I think it was right in here where you throw the ball and it causes pain. I don't know what they call that injury. And I think they shot him up before the game with painkiller, and he was okay in the first half, came out in the third quarter, and you could see an immediate difference. And it was obvious when that game was over, Brett Bielema should have gone to Austin Allen as his backup. I think Arkansas would have won what turned out to be a very close game if they had done that. And he didn't do it, and he lost the game. Then there was another one, I think maybe 2 years later, when Arkansas had a big lead at halftime. They came out in the second half, and Brett Bielema changed up the offense, kind of sat on the lead, and Missouri started throwing the ball and caught up. Again, coaching staff got a little overconfident at halftime and didn't do what they needed to do in the second half. So that's coaching. That's not Arkansas fans not taking Missouri seriously. That's not the players not taking them seriously. Now let's go to the 2 losses that they had against Chad Morris. Come on. Arkansas didn't beat any SEC team in those 2 years. There was nothing special about the Missouri game. They were terrible, just like they were in the other games. So now let's get into what really matters. These 3 games, Sam Pittman, the head coach, Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach, this is what we're dealing with right now. Arkansas is 1-2 in those games, could have easily been 3-0. They lost the first game in 2020. Because Felipe Franks, Arkansas starting quarterback, was injured and out for the game, and you had to go with a freshman, KJ Jefferson, who played a magnificent game for a rookie. Arkansas was fired up. Their players were excited for that game. They almost pulled off a win. Missouri just won the game. The next year, Arkansas comes back and wins 34-17, doubled them up. Wasn't close. Then the third year, this year, here's what happened to Arkansas. You got to go back and look at the 2 games they played going into that game. You had a huge game with LSU, which turned out to be the SEC West champions. They held LSU to 13 points. That was Arkansas's defense best performance of the year. The defense had progressively gotten better as the season went along, and they were fantastic in that game. KJ Jefferson didn't play. Arkansas didn't have enough of an offense in that game, got beat 13-10. 3-point loss. Then Arkansas bounces back with another emotional game against Ole Miss, and they curb stomped those guys. They were up 42-6 at the end of 3 quarters. When you have a big emotional victory like that, your best probably performance of the season, and you've played 2 emotional games back to back, you're not going to come out snorting fire and chewing nails for the next game. I don't think Sam Pittman and the staff sat around the week of the Missouri game and said, oh, don't worry about these guys. They're not that good. We don't have to prepare. They were prepared. They worked hard. I don't think you can wind players up like a clock or stick batteries in them every week. They're going to have a natural letdown after 2 big games like that, and I think that's what happened to Arkansas. And it was a 2-point game. It wasn't a stomping, but suddenly this has turned into an issue because you didn't have those guys ready to play. I could tell again by watching on television they weren't into the game. I couldn't tell that. They looked a little flat to me. Not terrible, just a little bit flat. They didn't look as good as they looked against Ole Miss, okay? Now, you got to ask yourself what's going on with Missouri. I mean, this is a team that played the #1 team in the country, Georgia, the best game they've had played against them all year. I keep looking at the scoreboard of that game. I finally tuned it in and started watching. Missouri looked like a different team. But then they come back after that and lose to Auburn, a terrible team. Okay, the week before they played Arkansas, New Mexico State, not a big game. You win that game, you take care of business, then you get back up for what is a bowl game type thing for you, because if you win that game, you go to a bowl. If you don't, you sack up your bats and go home. It's no surprise to me that Missouri's players will be a little bit more up for that game. But again, I don't view it, unless you've got an agenda, I don't think you view that as Arkansas just walked around sleepwalking in that game, and Missouri was this tremendously inferior team talent-wise that should have never won the game. I mean, I think when you assume that Missouri's terrible, that they don't have any players, that's arrogance on your part. So if you're saying Arkansas fans shouldn't overlook Missouri, but then you're overlooking them because you say they don't have any players. This thing, it's like a cat chasing its tail or a dog chasing its tail. Bottom line is, Arkansas's 2-7 record doesn't have anything to do with all this rivalry stuff. And I don't make predictions, but I will say when we go through the next 9 games of this series, it's not going to look like it does right now. Because I think Sam Pittman and his staff are still on target to turn this program around, and I think we're going to be looking back on this game in a few years and saying what we really should be saying right now, which is most of those losses came under Brett Bielema and Chad Morris, and the series is not lopsided ever since Sam Pittman came here. It's close. You could add up the total points in those 3 games, and Arkansas comes out ahead. They just had those 2 2-point losses. Okay, that's enough on that. Let's move on to the next question. S. Giles asks, how does the Liberty Bowl shape up to you? Some are saying that Kansas will be more fired up for this game than Arkansas because it's their first bowl game in forever. You know, Arkansas is down a lot of players in the portal, a lot of guys opting out, and it is true that Kansas doesn't have nearly as many missing from the game. They're going to have more experience in this game. But if you look at the way the 2 teams match up, Arkansas still has its running game pretty much intact. They got all their running backs. They've got KJ Jefferson in at quarterback, and he's part of the running game. And they're missing only 1 offensive lineman, their center. So I don't see any reason why the running game shouldn't work. Now the question might be the passing game, where you've lost a lot of your receivers, but you still have Matt Landers, who's playing in his last game as a Razorback, and he's the lone really experienced guy out there, and I think they're going to target him a lot. And I think he's a good receiver. So I think Arkansas will score points on this game. Kansas's big problem was they were dead last in the Big 12 in defense. You can score on these guys, even if you have some guys missing off the offensive side. The real issue is going to be on the defensive side, because Kansas got a decent offense. They were number 3 in the Big 12 in scoring offense. I think they were 5th in rushing and 7th in passing. So they're good, they're okay. But I think some of these backup guys at positions like linebacker and in the secondary that are having to step up and play, these are good players. They're getting their first chance to really show what they can do, and I think they'll be excited. I don't think you're going to see Arkansas go into this bowl game going, we had a bad year, what are we doing? We're playing in this bowl game, it's not a big game. I think it's a big game to a lot of these guys. And for the guys that came back, you know, guys that are seniors and could have opted out of this game and they didn't, I think those guys have made it pretty clear the past few days, hey, we're here to try to win. I'm rallying these guys around me. We're all excited. We came to win this ball game. So there are some in the media I've talked to that do think Kansas will win this game. Arkansas media, I don't. I think the Razorbacks win this game. That's my take on it. Okay, True Mike 22 says, a guy on Hogville said that Matt Landers has a year of eligibility left. Is this true? Man, has there been a lot of confusion about that. And I think it's mainly on social media and message boards saying, well, he's got another year. Why do they keep saying he doesn't? Well, the official word from the athletic department, and they're not going to lie about this, he doesn't have any eligibility left. This is his last game as a Razorback. And credit to him, kudos to him. I mean, he's still playing in this game. If anybody could have opted out, it's him. But I think he understood. He's the one guy coming back at wide receiver that they need, that they have to have, and he's playing in this game, and I think he's going to make a difference. So, Matt Landers, thank you on the part of Razorback fans for stepping up and playing in this game, even though your eligibility is up when this bowl game is over. Mousetown asked, how are we doing on the transfer portal? Coach Pittman said he was happy with the class we signed, but we needed a bunch more guys from the portal. Hopefully the good ones haven't already been snapped up. No, they haven't been snapped up. You've got up until the late signing period, which is the first week in February, in order to bring more guys in out of the portal, and they've already brought some in. And then you're going to have another period in the spring where you can bring guys in, and 2 of their best guys out of the portal came in the spring. So they still got plenty of time. Yes, they need about 8 more guys. Let's look at who they brought in since signing day. John Morgan, he's a 6'2", 265-pound defensive end from Pitt. He kind of looks like the aggressive edge rusher that new defensive coordinator, Travis Williams, he says he's looking for. At Pitt, this guy had a total of 72 tackles, 49 solo, 23 for loss, 14.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups, 3 forced fumbles, 9 offers, including Tennessee, Missouri, and Colorado, and he's got 1 year to play. Looks pretty good. Then on Thursday, Williams landed South Florida linebacker Antonio Greer. He's 6'1", 223, and comes in with 228 tackles, 133 solo, 1 pass breakup, 10 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and 2 interceptions, and 1 of them he took in for a touchdown. So Arkansas has some really talented linebackers, but they need experience at that position, linebacker, and I think they've taken a step. They still might want to bring in another one. The situation is similar at tight end with at least 1 4-star coming in and maybe 2 at tight end. They want a couple of those guys to, out of the signing class, and one's already there. But they're putting a full court press on the next guy. He's a North Texas State transfer. His name is Jake Roberts, 6'5", 250, out of Norman, Oklahoma. This year he caught 28 passes for 394 yards and 3 touchdowns. Very interested in Arkansas out of high school, but Chad Morris never offered him. He's also looking at Baylor, Tennessee, and Nebraska, but really likes the new tight ends coach, Morgan Turner. Scheduled for a visit the first week of January. All of this courtesy of Otis Kirk, who keeps up with this thing a lot better than I do. He's the best out there, not just recruiting, but the portal. Now, they also want to bring in a couple of more receivers. There's one out there that I think they might get. They've already gotten one really good receiver who may be better than anybody they have right now. And they're looking at another one, tall, fast guys that are big targets. Again, you may be looking at another linebacker or 2, a D lineman or 2, maybe 1 or 2 people out of the secondary, maybe another offensive lineman. They've already brought in 1. So again, 7, 8 more guys out of the portal, and I think they'll be in good shape. and they've got till next spring to make that happen. Okay, Florida man wants to know, what do you think reasonable expectations are as a Hog fan? I'm happy if the Hogs make a bowl game every year, and though sometimes we'll get some great playmakers and have some breaks and win 9 or 10, some years we won't get the breaks and have some injuries and go 6-6. You know, if all fans were like you, Sam Pittman and his staff would have it made. But unfortunately, they're not. So where are we headed with this thing? What can we expect over the next few years? I'm not a soothsayer. I don't have a crystal ball here. But here's what I look at. And I've covered a lot of coaches since 1975. The big difference between this guy, Sam Pittman, and all the rest of them is they all had guys on their staff that were good recruiters, and they would say, you go get them. But not everybody did that. Sam Pittman, from his time with Kirby Smart at Georgia, came up with the philosophy he has now, which you are on this staff, you're expected to recruit. Every year when recruiting is over, I will look at who you brought in. If it's not up to my standards, you will be gone. We've already seen him fire some guys over that. I think he has the same attitude about the portal, which is why he brought in the defensive coordinator that he did, which is why he brought in the tight ends coach that he did. I think those guys are expected to make a difference in recruiting. And when you look down the road and you ask yourself, what is the future? Is it 6 wins, 7 wins, sometimes 8 wins, or can you get up and sort of be like Arkansas was in that period with Houston Nutt, and then there was a hiccup, and then Bobby Petrino got it going, and you're talking about a 10 or 12-year period where they went to 2 SEC championship games, almost won one of them. I think had 2 or 3 10-win seasons, maybe 3 9-win seasons. Can they do that again? Yes, I do believe. But what it takes to do that is recruiting has to be there consistently. Again, we're just now into the 3rd year of this guy recruiting. Let's look at what it's going to be like after 4 and 5. Everybody says that knows about recruiting, it's that 5th year when the full impact of your recruiting starts to come into play. And we're not there yet. I think it's going to continue to get better. I don't think they're going to win 6 games next year. I think they're going to be back somewhere around 8 or 9 again, maybe get to 10. But the key, if you're ever going to compete, and man, it's hard to get used to this, but apparently SEC West title, that's sort of out because there's not going to be a East and a West. When Texas and Oklahoma come into the league, they're going to go to a pod system, and it's just everybody kind of shaking everybody around and playing each other. They just put the schedule in there and shake it up. Okay, this year, your year to play these guys and that team. So I don't know how that's going to work, but I do know that trying to win and put yourself into the college playoffs, because keep in mind what's looming ahead on that. A 12-team playoff, not a 4-team playoff. So that gives you more opportunities to get there. So down the road, with his recruiting, can Pittman get Arkansas into a 12-team playoff? I believe they can. Now, can they ever be what Arkansas was in the 60s, which is what I've talked about for years? I don't know. I've always said, if Frank did it in the 60s, somebody else, the right guy, could do it now. But that's a tough thing to do. I mean, you had an entire decade in which they had one bad team. The rest of the time they were perennial top 10 teams. They won a national championship, came within a few points of winning 2 more. They were, they recruited well. How did they do that? How did Frank do that in the 60s? He didn't do it with facilities or money, because Arkansas didn't have facilities or money. He did it by getting really good coordinators who then sort of put good coaches around them. And that's what it takes. Again, you've got this guy who's going out looking for recruiters and then saying, okay, but you also got to be a good position coach. And I think he'll continue to tinker with this staff until he gets it right. I think he still wants to play bully ball. I think he still believes the answer is to get stronger guys up in front on offense and defense and push people around. And that may be still down the road. Okay, that ties into this next question. Rob's 4516 asks, can you comment on why Jamel Walker was let go? I've seen some interesting comments on Hogville. All kinds of rumors there. Don't pay any attention to that. I think it's pretty obvious what happened. You got a head coach that some people think is in over his head in the job, and yet what did he do when he looked at this season? He looked at all of those times when they were in the red zone and they didn't score, and he didn't say, well, that's just play calling on Kendall Briles' part. He actually looked at the film. See, coaches look at film more than we do, believe it or not. They spend 8-10 hours a day looking at this stuff. And I think he looked at critical situations all year and said, you know what? We're not strong enough. We need better endurance. We ran down too easily. And that's on our strength and conditioning coach. We need a better guy. So he made a change. And we'll see how this goes, but here's the thing that's going to be interesting. We're about to enter, after this bowl game, we get into January, we're entering that off-season conditioning program. What does that really mean? It means you're not going to see squat, except we're going to look at these little things on Twitter, you know, these little videos that have music. You'll see a guy pushing the sled, some guys lifting weights, they're running, coaches are yelling at them. What does that really mean? It doesn't tell us anything. We're not going to know, even begin to know until next fall, if the man in charge of the strength and conditioning program now is going to make a difference, and it might be next year after next before we see the full effect. But again, if you have a head coach who's looking at his team and saying, we need to be bigger, stronger, and faster. We need to have more endurance. And I'm going to keep looking for the right strength coach till I find him. That's the kind of guy you want as a head coach. Okay. With Dr. Strangepork asked, with the recent football class signed, which was the biggest catch? A lot of people are going to question this, but I would say Jacoby Criswell, a backup quarterback out of North Carolina. Why a backup quarterback? Why is he the biggest get in the class? All you had to do is watch this team the last 2 years and see what happened when KJ Jefferson either wasn't full speed in a game or was hurt or even missed a game. Everything changed. And look at Kendall Briles. Here's what a lot of fans don't know because they're not at practice. They don't know that with the backup quarterback Arkansas had, Malik Hornsby, who had a totally different skill set than KJ Jefferson, they had to come up with and work on a special package each week for this quarterback because he didn't do the same things that Jefferson does. That's a waste of time, in my opinion. So what they've done now is they've gone out and gotten another KJ Jefferson, a guy that's very similar to him in style, can run it, can be a physical runner, can throw the ball. You don't have to change your offense for this guy. And they brought in a freshman, Malachi Singleton, who's like that too. So now, remember the question we got 3 or 4 weeks ago about, it doesn't seem like to me Kendall Briles ever knows how to develop a backup quarterback. And I went throughout his career and showed on graphics what he'd done at each of the schools where he'd been before he got here, and that he always had a history of having sometimes not just 2, but 3 backups that contributed. Well, now he's in that situation again because, again, the offense doesn't change when KJ goes to the bench. And I've also said that I think what their plan was with Criswell was not just to bring him in case Jefferson got hurt. I think they're going to play him some with the idea that you don't put Jefferson out there as much and you decrease the chances of him getting hurt. You got a good lead in the third quarter, go to your backup quarterback. Let him go to the bench and rest. Not going to get hurt that way. So we'll see if this happens. But again, that's the biggest get to me because they got somebody that is, I think, going to put them in a position where they don't automatically lose if your starting quarterback gets hurt. Okay, Martinsburg. Well, wait a minute. Am I ahead of myself? Okay, I got to go down to the next one. Is this Razor Alex? No, this is Marty Bird's Proxy. Okay, I'm getting behind here. I don't normally have to do this stuff. Marty Bird's Proxy wants to know, with transfers going and coming nowadays, what is the required coursework to be completed at the previous school, or is that being waived as well? No, it's not being waived. The NCAA for many years has had what I think is one of the best things the NCAA ever did. It's called an academic progress rate, APR. And what they did was standardize a plan that each athlete in any sport you want to name, at the end of each semester, they had to have this much progress toward their degree. And that was done to prevent what had happened before. It was a big criticism of college athletics in that you go recruit some great athlete, you don't worry about academics, just try to keep him from flunking out. And then he gets to the end of his senior year and he still needs another year of school just to graduate, and it's like, bye, see you. The guy's off down the road and trying to get a job. The APR prevents that. You cannot play this young man unless he's making progress every semester toward his degree. Now, could you bring in a guy out of the portal that wasn't up to those standards? Because if you fall below the standard each semester, then you're not eligible. You have to be completely separated from the team. You're just doing academics. You can't go over there to meetings. You can't be in the workouts or anything like that. And that's happened to a few Razorbacks over the years. So could this happen in the portal? Well, I suppose, but I talked to Otis about this and we kind of agree. With all the players that are in the portal these days, do you really think teams are going to go into the portal and take a guy that's academically ineligible with the idea of, well, it's a long time till football season. We'll bring him in here, we'll get him eligible, and then he'll play next fall. Well, you could do that. I've never seen it. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. So for the most part, what we're looking at out of the portal is that's the number one thing that's got to be there. That's where you start. Yeah, he's eligible. Now let's see if we can get him. Can he help us? And on down the line. So there's the answer to that question. Razor Alex 88 says, I've been seeing on Twitter how with each commitment in our class that is signed, a billboard in their town projects that happened and projects that they've signed for all to see. It's a brilliant recruiting tool. Is this new or has it been around for a while? He's talking about these electronic billboards. And if you're on Twitter or Facebook, you saw this, because what started happening on signing day and the next day, all of these guys who had signed with Arkansas, they're walking around their hometown and somebody says, hey, have you seen yourself on the billboard? And they go where the billboard is and there it is. Boom. It's got my picture on it. It's got the graphic that I signed, who I've signed with. The kids liked it. The parents liked it. Great PR tool. And whoever came up with this idea at Arkansas deserves a raise. They clearly knew a lot about electronic scoreboards. A couple of days ago, Alyssa started looking this up, and I never asked her what she found out, but she did say that it's a lot easier to do this sort of stuff with electronic scoreboards because all you need is a graphic. You don't have to submit a graphic and then get it photoshopped and then printed onto several pieces of paper that then have to be plastered onto a billboard. And then it has to stay up there for a while, and it's always up there, so you're always paying for 24 hours. If it's up there a week, a month, you're paying for all that time. Now, you can have your message up there for a minute. It cycles into another message, to another message, to another message, and then you're back up 3 or 4 minutes later. And so you're not paying for the whole time that you're up on that billboard, and again, all you got to do is submit the graphics, and with the technology, boom, it's up there. Now, all of that's good, and Arkansas got some benefit out of it, but I think it's going to be short-lived because I'm assuming that it's such a good idea that you're going to see it popping up everywhere. We'll see what happens in the late signing period, first week of February. If other schools start doing this, I bet they will, and certainly by next early signing period, next December, I think it's going to be commonplace because it's such a good idea. All right, look. There continue to be fans out there that aren't going to let go of this Simmons Bank Arena. Why was there no TV for the game there? Why do they do this to us every year? Because we're still getting questions on it. So Kevin says, if there is a facility that is not in this decade technology-wise, then it's just dumb, and I'm not buying it. Okay, it's not a technology thing. I promise you, the people that manage Simmons Bank Arena know full well what they would have to do. It's not that they don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense financially. I can understand the technology of a brand new $65,000 Corvette as opposed to my little SUV that, costs less than half that. I can understand the technology involved in that vehicle, but am I going to spend $65,000 to drive it one day out of the year? Of course not. So you're expecting Simmons Bank Arena to go, okay, let's have somebody come in and wire this all up and hook it up to the internet and buy all the equipment, get the cameras, and then we're going to have to hire people to operate it. We're going to do all that for one game a year. No, it's not going to happen. The only answer to that, if you want televised games there, is for Arkansas to come up with an opponent good enough that the networks will come in and say, hey, we'll pick that game. Yeah, we'll bring our own equipment in there. But you know what happens? You get an opponent like that, Arkansas is going to want to play that game in Bud Walton Arena because they make more money off of it that way. So why do they do this thing every year this way? Why is there no TV, and why are they perfectly fine with it being that way? Because this is all about fans in Central Arkansas having one game a year where they can go to the game with their kids and watch it. Now think about it. You don't have to have season tickets if you live here in Northwest Arkansas to go to a Bud Walton Arena game. Not all of those games are jam-packed, every seat filled. You can figure out which games you're going to be able to get a ticket. You go up, people are standing outside the arena selling the ticket. You buy it, you go in and you watch it. You can't do that if you're in Central Arkansas. You're not going to drive all the way up here and then get here and have the chance that there won't be any tickets. So this is the one time of year when those people can go and buy a ticket, bring their kids, and watch a game. And the players come in, they sign autographs, they go to Children's Hospital, do some other things while they're there, and it's good for everybody. And this is what I've read over and over again through the years on social media. You'll find some kid that's at the U of A, and this is what he says. I was 8 years old when my dad took me to a game in North Little Rock. It was the first time I ever saw a Razorback basketball game. It was awesome. We started going every year, and I knew when I graduated from high school where I was going to college. I was going to the U of A because I can get a degree there, but also I'll be a student so I can get in all the games. Yeah, that's where I'm going, and that happens a lot. So again, you're generating future fans, you're helping the school with enrollment, especially kids from our in-state. And again, I think you're doing something nice for the people of Central Arkansas who are just as big a Razorback fans as they are here in Northwest Arkansas. They're just not as close to the arena. So that's why they do it. I know it's a sacrifice to ask Razorback fans that don't go to these games, that just watch it on TV, to one time a year, just resign yourself to either listening on the radio or just don't pay any attention to it. Find out what happened when it's over. That's one game out of 30 plus. But some people don't want to let go of it. But don't blame Simmons Bank Arena. It's got nothing to do with those people. Okay, Lost in Swine wants to know, would you have any way of knowing if Nick Smith Jr. would return for another year, or if he's completely shut down for the remainder of this year due to his knee? I don't have any way of knowing for sure, but this is another one of those rumor things. That's been going around ever since the first time that he was out. Oh, his parents don't want him to play, or his agent's telling him no. That turned out to be false. He came back. I don't know why people can't accept Eric Musselman's word on this. Does he have a reputation of being a liar? Is he making this stuff up? Look what he said. It's a knee management issue. And when his knee is better and he's able to play, he will play. That's what happened the first time. Now we're going to have to go through that again. Now the good news is it's apparently not a serious knee injury because there's been no surgery involved. It's not an MCL or an ACL. It's not cartilage damage. They haven't gone in and scoped his knee. He's got some sort of a problem and they're not talking about it, which is their prerogative. Keep in mind that this is a medical issue and it's against government regulations for medical conditions of college students to just be made available to anybody out there. So that's why they're not talking about the specific nature of the injury. But again, I'm told that the kid really wants to play, and it's bugging the fool out of him to have to sit on the sidelines and watch the other guys play. So he wants to get in, but he's got to wait till that thing's ready to go again. How long is that going to be? I don't know. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month. Maybe he only plays in the second half of the SEC race. At worst, maybe he only plays in the NCAA tournament. But I think he'll be back because he wants to be back, and I don't believe there are people behind the scenes telling him not to play, which is the rumor. Okay, our last question is from Carol Ann Moose, and she says, I saw the photo you showed last week of Hal Mumme wearing a Davy Crockett outfit at the Alamo, pointing at something. I know you said he's a big Davy Crockett fan and was Mike Leach's close friend, but what is he supposed to be pointing to in that picture? And we don't have the photo. Courtney got it up last week. I don't know how to do that. Let me just, for those that didn't see it, let me just point out once again that Hal Mumme was Mike Leach's head coach at Kentucky, and they've been friends throughout their coaching careers, and they're very much alike. Here's where they're alike. both of them, if you sit down and talk to them, are more likely to talk about something other than football. They're good at it, but they like talking about other things, and both of them are big history buffs. Now, Leach, I think he grew up somewhere out west, Idaho, Montana, somewhere out there. And he's got a big interest in Native American tribes and Indian war chiefs, and he wrote that book on Geronimo, the Apache war chief. And Mumme is more interested in the Battle of the Alamo because he grew up in Texas in San Antonio. And if you know any of these Alamo guys, and I'm one of them, all we do is read books and sit around and argue about it all the time. And when I sat down with Mumme, we talked a little bit about Leach and a little bit about football, but mostly we talked, and I mean it went on for an hour and a half, 2 hours, about these various theories about what really happened at the Alamo, because when it was over, all the guys that fighting on the Texas side were dead. So they're not there to tell you what really happened. So there's all kinds of theories about who did this, who did that. Did Davy Crockett surrender? Did he die fighting? All right, so what was the picture all about? Well, you got Mumme, first of all, dressed up in full Davy Crockett garb. He's not just wearing the hat. He's got the jacket, or the what do you call that, buckskin outfit. He's got the cap. And he's standing in what is now a courtyard off to the side of the Alamo Church, and he's pointing off toward the north like this. Now, what does that mean? Okay, Mumme is one of these guys that believes, because nobody knows this for sure, that Crockett was one of a group of guys that were assigned to defend the area in front of the church, because there was a section of the wall that was missing, and they put up a bunch of, it's called the palisade. It's like stuff stuck in the ground. I mean, big logs that are stuck in the ground with a pointed top, like a palisade. And it was presumed to be vulnerable, so they wanted Crockett there because they thought he was a better fighter, a better shooter, all this stuff. So he's there. So when this attack starts at 5 a.m. on March 6, 1836, all these Mexican troops are coming in from the north. They're around a corner and on the other side of what's called the Long Barracks, so the people in front of the church can't see that. They don't know what's going on. And they're all asleep. They've got some sentries out around the edge of the fort, but those guys got killed. They fell asleep too. So Mumme is one of these guys that believes that Crockett, there's a wall that runs from the church out toward the west, and there's an arch in that wall, and Mumme believes that Crockett heard through that open archway the noise of all these troops coming from the north, so he ran into that area, which wasn't a courtyard in those days, it was a livestock pen. And he ran in there and he could hear all this stuff and he could see them coming, and he pointed and said, "Here they come." So that's what he's doing in that photo. And I know to a lot of you this means absolutely nothing, but she asked for the explanation of what Mumme was doing. I will say this about Mumme. He's just like Mike Leach. We've read all these stories over the last week or so about Mumme and Leach, and especially Leach, and the conversations that people have had with him that had nothing to do with football. Mumme's the same way. And he's a guy that you can sit down and talk to for 2 hours and you're just going, wow, this guy is really cool. That's the way I view him. And so Mike Leach is not around anymore, but Hal Mumme is. And anytime I get a chance to talk to that guy, I will take the opportunity. And Alyssa knows him really well. She knows him better than I do. Okay, that's our edition of Ask Mike for this week. I thank you for allowing me to do this by myself, getting a little confused on the questions. I'm out of my element here. I normally just answer this stuff. I don't do all this technical stuff. But I appreciate your being here, watching it, and I promise you next week, I'll be sitting over here, Courtney will be here, and we're back to normal. So thank you, and we'll be back again a week from today.